there is this singular kind of perception of the data space. And I want to change that because I buck all the trends. I don't do maths at all. I failed it. I'm terrible at it. I love data. It's all text and pattern recognition that I work with when I'm working in my software. I'm really passionate about it. It's fascinating, but we don't always get to see that side. And that's fair enough because there are genuinely a lot of introverted people in this space. So I feel it's my responsibility to, on behalf of the people who don't want to speak up or can't, to say, look, it can be fun. It can be really interesting. You can get so much out of it. And data people are not boring. Like, the best community I have is the data people on LinkedIn.
Hi everyone, my name is Lauren Hawker-Zaffer and this is Redefining AI. Redefining AI is a podcast hosted by Squirro and the Squirro Academy. The podcast focuses on key narratives and discussions that drive digital innovation and help people understand artificial intelligence, machine learning, insight engines in the insight era. Today, I've been joined by Susan Walsh, and I'm enthusiastic about the discussion that lies ahead. Susan is the founder and managing director of the Classification Guru Limited, a specialist data classification, taxonomy, customization, and data cleansing consultancy. Now, she is an industry thought leader. She's a TEDx speaker and an author of Between the Spreadsheets, Classifying and Fixing Dirty Data. She's also the founder of Code, a methodology that her team uses to accurately and efficiently classify, normalize, cleanse, and check data for errors, which does help prevent costly data mistakes. Now, today I'll be talking to Susan about data, dirty data in particular, and why she is so passionately engaged in a mission to fix data and corporate data landscapes. But just before I hand the mic over to Susan, I want to start by setting the scene a little. If you ever analyse data, you can empathise with the pain of exploring your data only to find that it is dirty, poorly structured, full of inaccuracies, siloed, or perhaps incomplete. Slower processes that are affected by the state of data can ultimately lead to missed opportunities and lost revenue, with Gartner 2021 research indicating that the average financial impact of poor data quality on organizations is around 9.7 million per year. Enterprises are, of course, taking steps to overcome dirty data, and someone who can really help us find out more about those steps and the core causes of dirty data is Susan. Welcome, Susan.
Thanks, Lauren. Great to be speaking to you, fellow Scot.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it's wonderful to be able to welcome a fellow Scot.
Nobody can say squirrel like we do.
That is true, squirrel. And I'm hoping that everyone can understand us. If they don't understand the conversation, they're at least going to get a test of authentic Scottish accents. Yep. Are you in Scotland at the moment, Susan?
No, I live outside London now and have done for 20 years. So my accent's very toned down and I've slowed it down. But, speaking to other Scots, I do kind of speed up. So I'll be very careful.
So this is a first. It's another first, a classification guru.
Yeah.
In series 1 of Redefining AI, I've had the pleasure to talk to an evangelist, an astrophysicist, but never a guru, which is, as we know by definition, a Sanskrit term for a mentor, guide, expert, or master of certain knowledge or a field. So given this, Susan, what is a classification guru and who is in need of one?
Well, I would say it's a self-appointed, self-claimed role, but when I left the spend analytics company that I was working for and had been for 5 years, and needed a business name, I didn't want, Susan Walsh Consulting or Walsh Consulting or data something. I wanted something that explained what I did in the business name, because as part of my job, I classify company names. And the number of company names that have no relevance to what they actually do is quite staggering. So I wanted to make sure that it was related to the services that I was going to provide. And the kind of people who need a classification guru initially were just in the procurement space to have their spend data classified and their suppliers normalized, so they could see how much they're spending with each supplier across the globe in what categories. However, that is now expanded into CRM systems, changing ERP systems. I do any kind of cleansing of databases, as well as categorization of spend data, and soon also retail category management marketing data too. So it kind of, what we do can be applied to all different areas of data.
Okay, I mean, that sounds like a lot of data flowing along the classification of lots of different data systems. Why is it spread from, as you mentioned, like procurement into so many different data systems?
I think the tagline "fixer of dirty data" has really caught the attention of a lot of people outside of just the procurement world. And people will now come to me and say, I'm not even sure if you can help me with this, but we've got this problem. Do you think you can help? And I'll either say, I've never done it before, but I think I can. Let's give it a go. Or I'll say, no, I'm sorry, I can't do that. You want to talk to someone else. And that's where it started from. And the other thing is, there are just so many data problems out there in every single area of business. Everybody needs help. This is not a siloed problem. It's across the board.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I just actually read and heard recently that Andrew Ning as well on LinkedIn, that he was stressing that data quality is really something that needs to be looked at, and it's an approach that should be taken to build foundations for successful AI deployment in particular, but we really need to be looking at the core fundament of data.
It all starts with this. It really does.
Before we go into looking at sort of dirty data, I just want to go back to one word. So classification in itself, what is classification? Because I imagine that it can be interpreted in quite a few different ways.
Yeah, interestingly, when I set up the business, I found out there was a different kind of classification to the classification I knew. My classification is taking a supplier name, and it could be something like Dell, and then I'll have just like a bank statement. There'll be a whole load of lines from the invoice of things that have been purchased by that company, and it will look like keyboards, a mouse, a monitor, some cables, a laptop, maybe a tablet. And either using an existing taxonomy, or we will build a customized taxonomy. We might say level 1 is going to be IT, level 2 is going to be hardware, and then level 3 will be either laptops, accessories, peripherals. And then you could actually go into a further level of detail beyond that, depending on who the client is. And then what that means is, when we roll up all our categorized, classified data, as a company, we know we spent X million with IT this year, X million with professional services, X million with facilities or travel. And then if we want to dig deeper and then like travel, maybe we want to know how many air tickets we've bought this year, or buses we've used, or hotel stays. We can then go into that level of detail and start to negotiate better rates with suppliers, like on a global basis. Like hotels, you could have a global rate with certain hotel chains for all your staff, rather than paying hugely varying rates in different countries for basically the same thing.
Okay, interesting, great. Yeah, it's good to keep a sort of an alignment with what you would define as classification and what it's used in your.
Yeah, and the other side of that, the classification that I don't do is file hierarchy and security classification. So, sensitive, confidential, etc. Mm-hmm. That scares me. That's not my thing.
Okay, so the word data itself can also be sort of classified or modified by adjectives.
Yeah.
And many have become relatively fond of speaking and defining data using the word or the adjective dirty. Now, and maybe following two trails of thought here, I would start by asking you, what is dirty data? And we've touched upon very, very briefly there at the start, but why is it being talked about so often at present?
I've got about 8 different types of dirty data that I talk about, and that's things like missing information, typos, information in the wrong columns. You see that quite a lot where you have a city in the zip code or the postcode or the town in the address level 1. There can be different units of measurement. Different countries are measuring things different ways, kilometers, meters, etc. Formatting, particularly dates, is a huge problem across the globe. You can't get documents to match up because the dates are different in different countries. We've got duplicates. We can't forget our old friends, the duplicates. I think that's 6. I can't remember. What have I done with the other 2?
Outdated?
Outdated could be one. Or misleading data. Missing data, I think we've talked about. Anything that's not right. And again, depending on the area of data that you work in, because it's that, it's like data is like the world. Within it, there's like lots of different countries of different types of data. There'll be specific data problems to certain people. But those are the common ones, I would say.
Mm-hmm. So why are people talking about it so much at the moment then?
There's been a huge focus on data, particularly since everybody had to work from home in lockdown. And businesses really started, from my perspective anyway, businesses really started to have a look at what they were spending the money on and where. And that's what's really shone a light on this. Or they found that they didn't have the right CRM system to cope with working from home in a different environment. Or they need to update categorization of all their products that they keep internally because not everyone's in the office now to use it. So there's been a lot more scrutiny. And I think data is the buzzword right now. It's where all the jobs are, highly in demand. In fact, there's a skill shortage in the area. Everybody's looking at it. And there's more data than ever. And that's something else. It's not just about looking at the data, but you need to be looking at the right data, not just all the data.
And you feel that with this maybe overflowing amount, the necessity to point towards the fact that there is too much data. We at Squirro as well, we look at the siloed experience of all data that's unstructured, looking at bringing together and obviously bringing adequate insights to it. With the too much data, you've spoken about other types of dirty data and the issues that it could possibly lead to in organizations. Is there one particular type of dirty data out of the 8 that you've mentioned that leads to more complicated issues in corporations?
I would say inconsistent data is a real problem. And when you've got silos, that's an even bigger problem because you can have the same product, for example, in a couple of different data sets. And within that, it could be tagged, labeled, categorized as different things, even though it's the same thing. And this happens all the time in business. Different countries call the same thing something differently. And I've just actually been working on a taxonomy, a global one for a food company. And we've had the whole, is it chips or fries discussion? What are we going to call it in the taxonomy? Because most markets call it fries, but the UK call it chips. So we went with fries, but you have to know to look for fries. I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent there.
No, but I think it's a good question as well, because obviously inconsistencies, you have to be able to identify what is an inconsistency. And it is about the ambiguity, or maybe, as you've highlighted upon there, like a semantic understanding or a nuance that aligns with the use of language. I mean, how do corporations even identify, or does it require someone like yourself to be able to say, well, look, here are inconsistencies, and that's why we need a taxonomy, or this is why you need someone to create more structure in the data?
Ultimately, regardless of the type of data in a silo, whatever it is, you don't have a full picture of what's going on in your industry, your project, your department, your business. And that's a problem. You could have two people replicating the same project in two different areas because they don't know that each other are working on the same thing, or even consistency of processes. Is it, two people in two different regions doing things differently, and one's taking longer than the other? And about efficiencies, and having all that data in one place, you improve. Instead of doing something 5 times across 5 silos, you do it once across one big silo, and it takes a third of the time. It's about that as well, and that increases profitability. And we always talk about saving time, saving money, but that's not really catching the eye of the decision makers in businesses who need to invest in their data. But telling them you're going to increase profitability, well, that's normally a KPI, so that's going to make them sit up and think a little bit more.
And I understand as well, Susan, that you've come up with your own methodology. And a lot of organizations, they incorporate methodologies to ensure that there is the completeness, there is the validity, there is the consistency and correctness of the data. Does your methodology align with that, or what did you develop the methodology for in particular?
The reason that I developed it was there's a lot of people working with data who are not data professionals. And they're really intimidated by the terminology or a spreadsheet. It's very scary for them. And I wanted to come up with something that they could relate to and they could understand and they could work with, because all the tools out there, including myself and all the services, we are fixing an existing problem, but what we really need to try and do is fix the problem at source, which is the inputting of the data. And so I say, make sure your data has its coat on, as in a jacket.
Yes.
And so first of all, we've got
any non-Scottish person.
Make sure it's consistent, and that means terminology, units of measure, processes, how we do things. Make sure everybody's doing it the same way. Also, and from a classification point of view, if you've classified everything as A and you need to change it to B, because it's all classified as A, it's super easy to change. If you've classified it as a mixture of A and B, then it's going to be a real problem trying to classify it all to B. Then, of course, it has to be organized too. So, we've all got wardrobes with clothes in there that we've probably, should have put on a nice hanger and maybe just threw it in there when we were tired one night. Data is very much the same as that. If you organize your wardrobe, so you have all your tops together, all your jackets, your dresses, maybe even by color if you're like me and like everything in order, it's so easy to go in and just pull out what you need. And data is exactly the same as that. So whether it's categorization, whether it's labeling things by region, by business unit, by person, however it is you need your data, have it tagged and labeled so that when somebody asks you, okay, well, how much did we sell in this region, or how much did we buy in this company, you could just pull out that information in 5 minutes rather than spending 3 days having to stick a whole load of spreadsheets together and making sure the numbers all add up and XYZ. And then, of course, accurate as well. So as accurate as it can be, let's be honest, there's no such thing as a perfect data set. It's not going to stay like that for very long. Let's just get it as accurate as we can be. And then once you have your consistency, your organization, and your accurate data, it's trustworthy. So that means when you have to send reports to senior managers, you know that that information is correct, that they're making the best business decisions that they can, that you're not going to be embarrassed by getting called up on numbers that don't add up on a chart, or they've picked something up that you hadn't even seen. Things like that. It just even one small little mistake that might be kind of, like Dell being classified as a hotel. If anyone sees that on a chart, they're going to suddenly question all the data and not trust any of it, even if that's the only single mistake in the data set. So hopefully by putting those processes in place from the start of the process of inputting the data all the way along to the point where the charts are ready, or whatever it is you're doing, that could be AI, making sure it's all ready before it goes in, and then when it comes out, making sure it's still the same. By doing that, it's going to make everyone's lives a lot easier, I think.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I suppose we could go back to to maybe a key or core question. I mean, you said that part of what you're doing, you're addressing the source, you're addressing maybe an older problem, like going back to the fundament, and you're highlighting that at the end, you've got this consistency, you've got the organization, you've got the accuracy, which then leads it to become trustworthy. How difficult is this in implementation then, if you are looking at maybe a global scale or global organization? When you envision like multiple people, is this part of the problem at the core, or is it part of the solution? I mean, how does that involve if we're looking at implementation maybe a little bit more on a larger scale?
I think that it should be done in small chunks, small steps at a time. So let's start with one department, test that out, see how it works. There's also definitely a change management piece around that, because everybody accepts change at a different pace. Some people will be happy to adopt new technology straight away, super excited to learn it. Other people will want to hold on to those spreadsheets and say, no, you can't have them, they're mine. And so you have to give everybody time to adjust and come round. And I think if you try to do everything at once, then ultimately it will fail. I think if you plan and know what you want your outcomes to be before you start, then it will make the process a lot easier. And let's be realistic, it's not going to be smooth sailing. And it could be years of like changing mindset, etc. Particularly older generations. Younger generations are used to new technology popping up every other month, whereas the older generation aren't. So it's going to take them longer to see the benefits of it.
Very much so. I think that probably a large part of what you're doing as well does involve the support that is required to ensure that there is this positive promotion of what's changing, what's happening is definitely going to be more beneficial in the long run as well. You mentioned quite a sort of a prominent word as well, spreadsheets, and people holding on to spreadsheets. And I mean, the podcast, we've titled it Between the Spreadsheets, data classification. And it's a term that is a word play, of course, on the well-known idiom, as we as native English speakers know, which is between the sheets. And this is also the title of your first book, not Between the Sheets, but Between the Spreadsheets. Now, dirty data and misuse of data, they're similarly two key terms that are directly linked to your professional profile and brand identity. And I mean, the analogies that are used here are unique and very original, Susan, especially in the field. And
Yeah.
I've personally seen very few individuals or organizations who are successfully, and I highlight that word because you're doing it very successfully, which is admirable, profiting from sexualizing data and the processes associated with it.
Yeah.
So what inspired you to take this approach to your profession, and what do you want to motion with this?
I think that's the best question I've ever been answered. And honestly, I never intended or started out with the intention of this happening. When I started my business, I had no connections in the industry whatsoever, not in procurement, not in data, not in business, full stop. And I realized very quickly that although there was a need for my services, nobody was looking for me because they didn't know I existed. And calling 100 people a day wasn't really going to do much for my profile.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started doing a lot of activity on LinkedIn, and it took years. And eventually the title Fixer of Dirty Data came up. And I guess I was surprised at how welcoming people were to that title and could see the play on words. And I think, everything I do for me. I'm not, obviously I want to grow my business, but I do it because I enjoy it and I own it. And I honestly thought that I didn't think it would be as accepted as it has been. But at the same time, there is this singular kind of perception of the data space. And I want to change that because I buck all the trends. I don't do maths at all. I failed it. I'm terrible at it. I love data. It's all text and pattern recognition that I work with when I'm working in my software. I'm really passionate about it. It's fascinating, but we don't always get to see that side. And that's fair enough because there are genuinely a lot of introverted people in this space. So I feel it's my responsibility to, on behalf of the people who don't want to speak up or can't, to say, look, it can be fun. It can be really interesting. You can get so much out of it. And data people are not boring. Like the best community I have is the data people on LinkedIn. They have a wicked sense of humor. And I think because it's me, I can get away with it. They know me because they've grown with me over the last few years as my business has grown and my profile has grown. And again, I do this mainly for the non-data people. That's who I'm targeting. I want them to see the fun side of data and just to warm to it. And so that's why I did the book title, because I think it was going to originally be called Dirty Data because that was my name. But then I saw an article, I think, in The Economist called Between the Spreadsheets. And I was like, I need that title. And even the publisher was like, oh, I'm not sure about that. But I felt it was really important I want people to look at the book and pick it up just because of the title. There's loads of data books out there, how to do this, how to do that. But I want data and non-data people to pick that up and read it and go, oh, wow, I got something out of that.
I mean, that's a really interesting story. And I think that, first of all, it's credible that you've decided that maybe a standard approach to cold calling, like sitting, trying to build a business slowly, and it does take a lot of effort. I mean, those of us who are listening and those of us who've been part of maybe a small knit startup community as well, we understand that there is a lot of graft that goes into building a brand, and it is once again something that you're doing very well. You said that you were maybe scared, or not scared, but concerned about the reaction that you might receive it following this sort of path, the way that you're embracing it. Have you had any sort of negative experience or a point in your journey that made you maybe question and want to turn back?
I think there was one experience that I talked about in my TED talk where I was uninvited from a webinar, and that's been the only thing. I am not trolled at all on LinkedIn, which is huge. But I think the other thing probably to say is that we haven't talked about is I'm a female in data and a female business owner, and it does make it harder to open doors. So you've got like nobody's going to open those doors. I'm just going to have to kick them down, or come in with a megaphone going, "Hello, I'm here." And that's been my approach. Like, don't be polite and make way for me. I'm just going to barge in and let everyone know, "Hello, I've arrived and I'm here." So you have to deal with me.
So in saying that, do you think that it's more difficult for females in data, and that more space should be created for females in data?
I think you have to create your own space. I would hate to be anywhere because I'm female or anything. I want to be where I am because I'm really good at what I do. But I also understand that I might have to shout a bit louder than the men to get heard, because and if I just do the same as the men, nobody's going to notice me. But if I do something a little bit different, it's a huge gamble, but for me, it's paid off.
I mean, it has paid off. If we look at success, and I mean, success is very subjective, both in terms of roads travelled to success and what it means to an individual. I mean, to every individual, success means something else. And when we talk about maybe the concepts and the underpinnings with someone like yourself and what you've just highlighted, you're an inspiring and ambitious female in the data space. You've published a book. You're also a TEDx speaker, what you've just mentioned, and a blossoming sort of business owner. What then would constitute as success and ongoing success in the future to yourself?
It's funny because if you'd asked me this in my 20s, I would have said it's money and position and job title, and it's none of those things now. For me, it's being content, being fulfilled, and just enjoying every day. Like, I genuinely love what I do, and that's the most important thing. As soon as I don't love this anymore, I won't do it.
And do you love it because you're contributing to helping people solve a real recognized problem? Or do you love it because of, as we've just talked about, the approach that you're taking, the originality that you're bringing, the sort of mold that you're breaking, you're shaping a new perception of what can be done with data? And I would say you're also encouraging people to come into the data spaces, both females and people that were maybe not that interested in data.
Yeah, I think I genuinely love the difference that I can make to my clients, but unfortunately, most of them I can't talk about because they don't want to admit that they have dirty data. Mm-hmm. So how I get around that is by promoting the business in other ways. And I love the other stuff that I do just as much. Like, I really do enjoy that. I have fun with it. And that is important to enjoy and have fun. And, we spend so much time at work. So get something out of it.
So in getting something out of it, could you maybe pass on some exclusive piece of information or value that would help our audience?
I think in general, people don't have enough belief in themselves. So if you don't believe in yourself, nobody else is going to, whether that's going for a job, whether that's starting a business, whether that's growing a business, whether it's changing careers. You have to believe in yourself first amongst everything else, and be yourself too. Like, so many, I think it's changing now, but when I was growing up and when I started in the corporate world, you had to be a certain way and act a certain way, and that really didn't fit with me. And it's okay to be yourself. Excellent. That's the secret sauce.
That's the secret sauce. So hopefully we've been able to not only inform people about classification and the importance of it, and also enlighten them a little bit more about dirty data, the types of data, and looking at maybe methodologies that certainly help it, and keeping it consistent, organized, and accurate so that they can build up this trustworthiness. But we've hopefully also provided a sort of insight into the importance of originality in a crowded space, I would say.
Yeah. There's plenty of room for everybody.
Is there anything that you would like to share in the final words as we move to the close of our session, Susan?
Yeah, just one more thing. Maintain your data. It's not good enough to just fix it or clean it. You have to regularly maintain it to keep it that way, or there's no point in doing it in the first place.
Good advice. Okay. So
nothing profound or, thought-provoking. Just please maintain your data.
Maintain your data, people. Okay. Thank you, Susan.
Thanks so much.
Thanks. So as we close this podcast conversation today, I want to take the opportunity to thank you, the audience as well, for sharing such a valuable experience with us. And if you want to find out more about Squirro and the Insight Engine, then go to the Squirro Academy on learn.squirro.com and access our education.